The US military has gone from "we support you, Israel" to "don't worry, Israel, we'll attack targets in Syria and Iraq and anywhere else anyone tries to attack you." Now, of course, I am oversimplifying these events for the US military, but to be honest, that's quite literally what's happening. When you look at the beginning, day zero, when Hamas attacks Israel, the whole world came together, or at least the allies of Israel, to include the United States, saying, "Israel, you have the right to defend yourself." Then the United States responds with, "Don't worry, Israel, we have a carrier strike group. We'll send it over to you." Israel continues to get attacked. "Don't worry, Israel, we'll send more fighter jets into the region over in Jordan." And Israel keeps getting attacked. "Don't worry, Israel, we'll send another strike carrier group into the region." And of course, Israel gets attacked again. Now, the underlying issue for Israel is the fact that they have a small military and they are rather exposed on the flanks up in Lebanon and Syria. And the US military's main goal in operation is to protect Israel at all costs. Now, who's the main enemy of Israel? Of course, Iran. Now, Israel is not at war with Iran, but they sort of are, because Israel is at war with Hamas. Hamas is tied to Iran. Israel is also dealing with Hezbollah. Hezbollah is the extension of Iran. And Iran has already met with the leaders of all of these factions, and Iran has already made the threat that if Israel continues their occupation and invasion of Gaza, Iran will have to intervene. And so if you're watching this video, I have the same exact thought as most of you. Are we really about to have another full-blown conflict in the Middle East? Okay, so first thing we need to understand is that the US military never left the Middle East. I want to make that clear. We're not in Afghanistan, we're still in Iraq, we're in Syria, but understand we still have a major footprint in the Middle East. You just don't hear about it too much. As far as other elements in the Middle East, we're fighting a ton of different factions. Now, a majority of them are tied to Iran. We're also in the Middle East to help combat efforts from Russia expanding into Syria. And so these are the main reasons why we're in the Middle East. It just so happens that Israel is now at war with a group that's tied to Iran, and because of this, we're sort of sucked into this campaign as well. Now, either way, the US military was going to support Israel, even if we were not in the region. Israel is one of the biggest strategic partners in the Middle East for the United States, so no matter what, we were getting sucked into this. Now, as far as one-on-one Iran versus the US military, that's probably not going to happen, but things can get close to that. Let me explain. First off, we'll start with the strike group that's already in the Mediterranean, because there's another one on its way. We'll get to them in a second. The strike group that is currently in the Mediterranean supporting Israeli operations have already stated they will go on the offensive. In fact, they are already preparing for an offensive to take out targets in Iraq and Syria. And these targets have already been identified. They are factions, again, tied to Iran. The other mission for the US Navy in the Mediterranean currently, at the time of making this video, there's only one strike group there, is to knock out rockets from Hezbollah and to help create a safe perimeter to the north by using reconnaissance assets. So again, at the beginning of the video, when I went, the US military went from just being a supporter to actually being in this conflict, the US military is legitimately in combat operations currently. Now, as far as the next carrier group that is on its way to the Mediterranean, there was a delay. However, the Department of Defense has indicated this carrier group specifically is for big military Iran. As in, the second carrier group, it will support operations from a big front, which means that they are just watching Iran in case they want to get froggy, in case they want to send big military elements like some sort of missile strike or something. That carrier group is to take care of that objective. Now, this war is really complex because we're really only focusing on Hamas, Gaza, Israel, but it's beyond the borders of that. In fact, Israel has already did some strikes over in Aleppo and Damascus, and Israel has continued to make an offensive over Lebanon and Syria. They are actively trying to strike targets that are trying to strike Israel. Now, I don't want to breeze over the fact that, again, Iran has made a legit threat saying if Israel continues their occupation and air campaigns over Hamas, we will intervene. So again, that is the implication that Iran is preparing for something, and there's a lot of evidence that says they are. Iran has made a call to action for their own people that if you are of fighting age, you should join the military in support of your Palestinian brothers. Now, they did not imply that that their militaries will march over into Palestine, but they did imply, hey, let's raise our forces, our military. And to be honest with you, Iran probably should be doing this because their country is not that unified right now. Now, there's also been evidence of Iran trying to get people to join their military from outside sources over in Pakistan. And Israel knows the implications of their continuous siege of Gaza. I mean, we're all on the internet. You see hashtag Free Palestine, hashtag I support Israel. Either way, I think we should all squash it and we should support peace in the Middle East legitimately. But either way, we're all seeing it. So as long as this war continues, more and more motivation from both sides is starting to fester, and that's not a good thing. And Israel has already stated that they have delayed their invasion due to bad weather. Israel is also dealing with complications within Gaza with the amount of civilian loss in Gaza, which is terrible. But Hamas is quite literally blocking the travelers from the north to South Gaza. Hamas is not allowing people to leave Gaza. Now, another way the U.S. military is highly involved with their role in Israel is quite literally donating munitions to Israel. The U.S. military has always been highly involved with the Iron Dome project because the U.S. military never really has to use their Iron Dome, and they don't have a lot of practice with it outside of like combat operations. So it's pretty much a swap program where U.S. soldiers will go over into Israel and they'll learn about the Iron Dome and the missile defense systems. You also have U.S. Special Forces who train within Israel. So the United States has always been embedded with Israel. Again, no matter what, we were probably going to get sucked into this conflict. There is also still zero indication how involved the U.S. military will be in Gaza. Considering the U.S. military has been rather open and public about their intentions within Israel, the United States probably would have said we are going into Gaza to help with the occupation. Now, as far as going into Gaza, the closest the U.S. military has gotten is that the U.S. military, well, the United States government, was able to broker a deal with Egypt to allow U.S. nationals out of Gaza. But again, the only issue is Hamas is not allowing for the flow of traffic in these open, public, safe lanes Israel has provided or allotted within Gaza. I also have to mention this because from the very beginning of the conflict, U.S. quote-unquote special operations have been in Israel, and there was a notion from the U.S. government that they will possibly help extract hostages. Nonetheless, that special operations is definitely helping with the reconnaissance efforts into Gaza. And so could the U.S. military get involved with the occupation of Gaza? Probably, but it looks like they're more focusing on U.S. interests, which is up into the north with Lebanon and Syria. And it's also quite interesting how Iraq has been brought back into history. Like, we don't hear about Iraq anymore. I mean, if you're friends with people in the U.S. military, there are still deployments happening there. You just don't hear about it. Nonetheless, Iraq and Syria have these logistic supply trains that Iranian forces can use to, secretly and quietly push logistics to Lebanon and down into the West Bank. So this is why the U.S. military has also really been wanting to get in on this conflict, because if we just sit there and allow all of this to happen, there's going to be an underlying threat in the nations we are already working with. In Iraq, you can have another total occupation of northern Iraq, and we don't want that to happen again because that was a whole lot of issues even for the people of Kurdistan. And of course, in Syria, being a power vacuum of a nation, the U.S. military already has been having difficulties in that nation, trying to perform missions and trying to be safe. Nonetheless, the U.S. military has indicated again they are more going to be on the offensive than the defensive in the coming days. So we will see what the U.S. Navy does when this second carrier group enters into the Mediterranean. Again, at the time of making this video, if you're watching this, that second carrier group is on its way. Their delay is over, and the U.S. military has indicated if Iran wants to fight, we are ready to fight. The other thing to mention is this. We don't know all of the U.S. assets in the region. What we see publicly is on paper, but the U.S. military has always been known to have a little bit of a surprise up their hands. Maybe there's a submarine in the region. Maybe there's more UAVs than we know in the region. Either way, it looks like the U.S. military is rather confident in their abilities if Iran wants to try anything. Now, the last thing I want to end on is this. What to look for. How effective is the U.S. military truly going to be with all of their assets back in the Middle East? Again, we haven't left the Middle East, but we haven't had this much firepower in a while. Is the U.S. military truly going to strike all of the targets they say they will over in Iraq and Syria? Syria is the front a lot of people are looking for, and there are a lot of vulnerabilities for Israel within Syria. Something else to look for is Lebanon. Hezbollah has already stated the reason why they are involved in this war is to help their quote-unquote Palestinian brothers. And what they are doing is quite interesting. Their job in this occupation and war is not so much to actually go in and attack Israel. They have been doing that, and they've actually been rather effective, but what their actual mission is to try flooding the Iron Dome, to try making the radar systems think all of the attacks are happening from the north, everyone look to the north, when in fact Gaza is also launching their own attacks, Hamas out of Gaza. So watch out for the north, because that seems to be a massive headache still for Israel. And as long as Hezbollah is still tied in with Iran, and Iran has elements coming in through Syria, Israel's going to have a whole lot of issues unless the U.S. military will stick to their word and be effective within the Middle East. Again, in Syria and to the north, near Lebanon.